You know, I think this is the closest thing to a zombie apocalypse I've ever seen in real life. Except those aren't zombies, those are North African Muslims flooding over the border of Morocco and Spain. And in reality, this actually doesn't look very different than what our southern border looked like under Joe Biden. Now, there's nothing new or surprising here. This is just a new invasion method undertaken by people that have been trying to subjugate the European continent and the greater Western world for 1,400 years. A method made possible by the modern sensibilities of the West and the suicidal empathy of the modern left. You know, it's no coincidence that the vast majority of these people, these so-called refugees flooding over these borders, are fighting aged males. The Muslim world really must have laughed and thought, what fools, when they realized that as long as they sent their invasion force unarmed, they would be allowed to enter into these nations they wish to dominate completely unopposed. At least until now, because Spain is deploying their military, and of all people, I would hope that the Spanish would do everything in their power to stop this, because for those of you that don't know, Spain was actually under Islamic rule from 711 to 1492, nearly 800 years of Islamic domination over the majority Christian nation of Spain. And it's not like the Islamic conquest and domination of Spain is a one-off. This is something that the European continent, European nations and peoples have been dealing with, as I said, for nearly 1,400 years. Modern leftists like to pretend like the evil empire of America is antagonizing and attempting to dominate and destroy these Islamic nations for no reason at all, as if they are perfectly innocent, peaceful, you know, the religion of peace, rah, rah, rah. When the reality is that, again, for 1,400 years, Islamic incursions into European lands have been a repetitive thing, century after century. Whether we're talking about the first siege of Constantinople in 674, or its eventual fall in 1453, or 800 years of Islamic domination on the Iberian Peninsula, the same thing has always been true, that Islam is a religion spread by the sword, and that justifies the domination and subjugation of non-Islamic people by the faithful. Islam is not the or even a religion of peace. Violence is the only language that they understand. And if you don't believe me, why don't you go track down a video of someone being stoned to death? Because I've seen people die in all sorts of ways online in my life. And there is something truly disturbing about an entire community gathering around a woman because she's been accused of adultery, and then throwing rocks at her until she no longer breathes. But there have been those that understand that the only way to speak to Islam is through violence, because that is the only way they know how to speak. A man that we have mythologized into a monster, a man who was held hostage by the Ottoman Empire and raised very intimately understanding the culture, the religion, and the violence inherent in that. A man who eventually escaped and took back his kingdom, and in order to prevent that kingdom from falling under the Ottoman Empire, from his people being subjugated, from his women being raped, from their sons being kidnapped and trained as soldiers for the empire under the Sultanate. Of course, I'm talking about Vlad of Wallachia. He understood better than most the language spoken by these people. And his response to their constant incursions into his land was to impale 23,000 Ottoman soldiers, creating a forest of bodies hung upon pikes. And that's a message that the Ottoman Empire actually understood. That's a message that made them stop. The Sultan turned his army around and evacuated the lands of Wallachia when Vladimir made this display. That not only will we resist, we will disfigure all who enter our lands with violence in mind. But the modern American West, with its modern sensibilities, has forgot that. Too many of our people have lived so comfortably that they think that everyone simply wants to get along and enjoy themselves and mind their own business. Not understanding that the entire Islamic world lives under the belief that their religion is the only true religion and that they have right to subjugate all those that do not follow their doctrine and understanding of God. It's not a joke. The Christian world has largely gotten past this. They don't hang or burn or drown women because they think they're witches anymore. You can call yourself a witch, a pagan. You can be a man and say you're a woman here in the United States. And you will not be stoned. You will not be hung. You will not be drowned. You will not be murdered in any way. The most you may face is some mean words, some judgment, some condemnation, boo-hoo. But for the Islamic world, it is still a very real thing that violence is acceptable to achieve their ends. That domination of the entire world by the Islamic religion is the only true and right way of the world. They are not going to stop. They have simply figured out that if they send their invasion forces unarmed, Western nations will allow them to enter unopposed. So I say props to Spain for sending the military. Because the invasion never ended. And in reality, I don't think the Crusades are over forever either. This is a war that has gone on for more than 1,000 years, and it doesn't matter if you're a Christian or not. If you are a Westerner, if you are European or American or Canadian or Mexican or South American, as far as they are concerned, as far as the Islamic ideology is concerned, you are a Christian or an infidel. You are the enemy. You are cattle to be subjugated. You are people to be treated as less than people. You, me, and every other one of us that does not bend the knee to the will of Allah. So what are we going to do about that, people?